Hi, guys. How is everyone
Hello.
today? I am here with the amazing Dr. Neuro Fiore. No, God dang it! I keep doing that.
That's all right. No, I usually just tell people to say neuro, but neuro
Yeah,
for yeah.
for EA. Okay,
Yes.
I say it right and then I mess it up again, and yeah.
It's a
Uh,
bit of a doozy.
right. So tell everyone who you are and what you generally do now for a living.
Thank you for having me. First things first, and thank you to everyone who submitted questions and to everyone who wanted to participate in this talk. I will start off by saying that I currently work with the Biden administration. I have worked with several administrations, starting with the Obama
Hmm.
for his first term, dealing with working primarily global health, really, but it spans into multiple areas, including infectious diseases, public health, epidemiology. Basically, I am there to essentially map work from what we know in the scientific data
Hmm.
to knowing how can we put it in terms of a paper that a lawmaker or a leader can essentially implement. So that's essentially what I do. Not even just for the United States, but primarily, mostly actually a lot of developing nations. So countries where the economy is not that strong,
Hmm.
or there's a lot of refugees, or there's a lot of like civil wars going on. There's a lot of countries that are going through that right now. So I primarily work with those. But obviously, with the pandemic currently we're experiencing with COVID, and I think everyone knows what's going on with that. It's been pretty much consumed about 80% of my time since then, and I've been
Hmm.
working on more domestic issues. So focusing really on working with the transition team for the Biden between Trump and Biden, and also kind of bringing in a lot of what we know about the sciences and how do we get vaccines out to people who really need it. And what are the kind of like just making sure I communicate the right information to people about what the vaccine does, whichever company you decide to go with, and
Hmm.
all these other factors. There's a lot that people don't understand, which is fine. There's just it's a thing that most people don't think about. And since COVID, now it's become like a big hot topic button topic where everyone wants to know what's going on, what's this best way to do things, what does it mean to be safe, and all this other stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's awesome. So I got to meet Neuro about what, 2 months ago now, a month ago.
It feels like a
It feels
year
like
ago.
forever. I know. We're in COVID time, so we've known each other for years. Because we're teammates now here
Yeah.
on Twitch, which is where we're actually broadcasting this, and just getting to know him and just learning about all these little things. And he volunteered to chat with everyone, and that's why I immediately took him up off words. Words are hard. I took him up on his offer. There we go. There's the words.
There you go.
Now, I want to, before we get into a lot of the talk of what we're going to do today, if you're watching us live on Twitch, we do have a question and answer session that we're going to be doing. There's some questions that were submitted ahead of time. And if you're watching live, feel free to submit some more questions, and we'll go through all that too. But first, I want to address why we're doing this and why I am doing this. Uh, no one has voiced this to me, but I am sure some people in the back of their minds are going, Tony, you're a quilter. You quilt for a living. You should stay in your lane because this is not what you do. Let's be honest. People may think that. It's this is what's happening right now, obviously is affecting everyone. This is important. Many people are aware that in before COVID times, BC, I traveled 50% of my time. I go to guests. A guest. I'm a guest at a conventions a lot of times. I speak at quilt guilds. I attend. I go to different quilt stores teaching. I lecture. I do all sorts of things, and I have not seen my husband. I've seen my husband more in this past year than I've seen him during our entire relationship. And it is it's changed everything. And of course, I've had to completely change my business. I've had
Mm-hmm.
to change my business model. I've had to adapt. This is what all businesses have had to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I want miss conventions. I miss people. But we have to be safe. We have to, just because we want to do something doesn't mean we should do it. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. I wanted to bring some things up because it's important that we all come together so that I can freaking go to conventions again and see all of you in person. So, I just wanted to address that first. So, with
Fair.
that being said, I so first off, you had said, Neuro, you had said that with what you do and everything else, I am actually going to pull my child's question first because I actually think, because you opened the door on that with the things that you do,
Hmm.
because I think it's important to understand some of your background and
Hmm.
not just answer stuff about COVID. So I want people to understand that you know you know what you're talking about. You're not going to perpetuate any myths. You're not going to make something up to benefit somebody else. Your intention is to help people and to
Hmm.
create a better health among the world.
Yes.
And so first, what is an epidemiologist?
So what epidemiologist is one of the fields I'm involved in, and it's essentially what I would consider to be the infectious disease detective, if
Mm-hmm.
I want to think of it that way. So they're not medical doctors, so they don't do treatment, but what they do is they're very informed about how diseases spread,
Mm-hmm.
how they originate, and how do we counteract them? How do we attack them from a people's perspective? So one of the many challenging factors of especially like infectious diseases right now
Mm-hmm.
is there's a lot that we're actually monitoring, and there's a lot of ways that diseases can pop up, and some things we don't even really, because there's just only so much manpower that we can't really monitor the rest of the world. um, so with COVID and all these other things, um, things mutate,
Mm-hmm.
things happen and naturally, and once they do happen, we need to figure out a plan as to like, okay, well, if something does turn up, how do we, one, figure out where is it coming from? Two, how infectious is it? Is it really infectious? Do we need to quarantine people? Three, how does it spread? Is it through bodily fluids? Is it through air? Is it through touching? Like
Mm-hmm.
all these little things. And how do we talk to the leaders of the world about this? That's one of the biggest factors, is that we need to be able to talk to non-science people. And that's a lot of
Right.
folks. Like it could be lawyers, it could be politicians and everything. We need to be able to go to the president, prime minister, whoever, and say, hey, listen, there's this really, infectious disease that's popping up here. We need to take steps
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, and Z to address this problem. And that's essentially what the epidemiologist does, is that they along with medical doctors, infectious disease people, they come in and really start formulating what we call like a playbook, like bit like kind of like what we do in video games. It's just like
Yeah.
a gaming guide. Like we know exactly a walkthrough of what we need to do, because it's really critical that we understand what the next steps are. And in terms of like why I, kind of mapping to exactly why I'm doing this right here on Twitch, because a lot of people ask, well, well, you do this work. Well, why do you come on Twitch to talk about this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I come on Twitch specifically because one of the biggest issues we have noticed with COVID, for example, is a big one, is that there's a lot of bad information and a very severe lack of understanding of
Mm-hmm.
how we talk about COVID, how we talk about infectious disease, also just in general how we do experiments and how we do clinical trials and things like that. It's a breeding ground for conspiracy theories and bad misinformation or disinformation. And so my job really on Twitch and Twitter, which is where my two main platforms
Mm-hmm.
are at, and hopefully YouTube, but
Which, by
is
the way, I have all of our things down below. Go follow him for all of his things.
And that's where I basically come in and talk about,
Mm-hmm.
well, what's going on currently? What is everyone doing about the problem? And what are some of the bad rumors and bad information that's out there?
Right.
There's a lot, and it's not sometimes it's not people's fault. I just want to make this clear is that sometimes misinformation, disinformation happens because some people will read the headlines and not really understand that there is a story behind those numbers.
Yeah.
One of the biggest ones that I've had to deal with is the whole 99. Well, this has a 99.1 percentile survival rate. It's a very common one I commonly
Right.
hear, and it's a commonly shared statistic that
Mm-hmm.
people don't really understand where it comes in, how the epidemiologists calculate these numbers and what the data feeds into it. But it's what happens when bad people get data and turn it into a story that
Right.
doesn't make sense, or a story that serves their purpose. And this is unfortunately the many big cases here when we are observing kind of
Right.
within the COVID world.
So let's actually address that one. So it's the biggest thing that I find whenever I'm talking to people that don't understand. They're like, "Well, if I get it, I'll be fine."
Mm-hmm.
It's not the disease itself that I have seen, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not the disease itself and possibly killing you, although I have personally lost people. It's the after effects that we don't know because
Mm-hmm.
we're still learning about these after effects. We both have a friend of ours whose fiance has been battling issues for months on this and
Mm-hmm.
has all of these after effects, and they're just trying to figure this out now.
Yep.
But it's also the strain on the hospitals.
Yes.
It's it,
Uh,
yeah.
I think you hit it right there. I think you definitely got two of the big points right
Yeah.
there. Is I don't think we need to just look at it from the case of like if you will essentially pass or not from this
Mm-hmm.
disease, but we have to think about one is like as you pointed out the long-term effects,
Right.
or what we nickname as the long haulers of COVID. We're discovering that there are some neurological issues, so brain issues
Mm-hmm.
involved with people who have been afflicted, lung scarring, and there are some even digestive issues as well. And they're still coming in, and the data
Mm-hmm.
is showing that this is not just a singular problem, but this is a systemic issue. So it
Mm-hmm.
affects the whole. It ends up in this case like giving issues for the rest of the body. And again, still being investigated. We're still
Mm-hmm.
finding out more things. This disease has been around for maybe a year, and we're doing as best as we can. But again, it has to be we're doing that. Second, you mentioned the hospital systems.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, a lot of these hospitals, they only have so many intensive care units or ICU beds, as you
Right.
guys probably hear in the news. There's only so many in a hospital. Now, keeping in mind that emergencies happen outside of COVID, that people need those beds.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are
Yeah, I was
um,
gonna bring. Yeah.
when you are being reckless and you get COVID and you have to be in an ICU bed, that's an ICU bed that could be necessary for someone who might have been in an accident or something else that will
Mm-hmm.
require that. And so these are things we have to think about from this perspective that not 100% of those beds are just for COVID patients.
Right. So someone that's had a heart attack may not, which would be normally survivable, may not
Mm-hmm.
survive that heart attack because they may not be able to get to a bed and a doctor in time because,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've seen that a lot with some of the Midwest states as well because of the fact, and some of them have to be shipped across state lines just because there was just not enough beds.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the harsh reality. And the third, finally, and this is something that's just started recently spurring up in terms of like the trending topics with the COVID world, is the idea of the mutations or
Mm-hmm.
variants, as we like to talk
Yeah,
about
we
it.
have a few questions about the mutations. Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people do. There's a
Yeah.
lot of information about that.
Right.
And I'm going to probably do the punchline really quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
then we'll address some of the
Yep, that's
specific
fine.
questions. So viruses in general, think about it in this case right here. And I share this analogy of everyone is I imagine that your virus its genetic code, right, is all coded in a big book. Now, every time that virus infects someone, a few letters change, right? Doesn't change the story, right? You just see a couple of misspellings. You're like, okay, I still know I'm reading War and Peace. Not a big deal. But every time, let's say like 1 million people get infected with this disease, and it just keeps going and going and going, by that time you have 1 million letter changes. That story is completely either a mess or it becomes incomprehensible. It changes completely, right? And that's what we're observing here, is that the virus is essentially mutated to the point where it's able to be more transmissible. So it can be infected with more people, can be infected a lot easier. Or we've seen it in this case where it can escape, as we call it, the immune system, which, the immune response. So these are troubling things that we want to make sure that we're keeping infections down. And that's one of the many reasons why I tell people it's not even about the survivability, right? It's making sure that we don't let this virus continue to propagate.
Right. And I think it is, and there's still stuff we don't know. There's still stuff that we're figuring out. And a lot of it, I think a lot of the conspiracy theories and this isn't a bad thing and this is made up, is because those scientists and those people that are giving us information change their mind. Well, that's because we get more information. I know for me, it goes back to, I always have to remind myself, it goes back to when you're in middle school and high school and you learned about the scientific method. You have a theory, you put your theory into practice. Nope, that doesn't work. Okay, let's get a new theory. And until you figure out what it is. And especially last February, March, we didn't know. Like, no one knew anything of what was happening, so that we just had to keep on figuring these things out. And unfortunately, we're just going to keep on doing that until we get a hold of this and hopefully stop it.
Hopefully.
Maybe.
I think we will. I think we will. I think we will. And I'm being very if those of you who are, who know me, or those of you Tony knows as well, like, I'm not here to paint a positive picture. This is the reality of the situation. And I know, and I could tell everyone here that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to want to get there.
We just need to listen and do our parts and get there. That's I completely agree. It's like I joke, with my friends all the time. I've joked with Neuro too. It's like, I cannot wait until we can all get together and just have some brunch and just be silly and have fun again. But again, like I said at the beginning, just because I want something doesn't mean, well, and I'm actually going to, there's a comment in chat. I'm not supposed to take them, but I am going to actually address this really quickly,
it's
right?
Fine.
There was a comment about this is why New Zealand has 0 cases. It's not just because of, everyone listens, everyone does that, but they're able to create a barrier between them and the rest of the world. And it is, imagine if everyone in the entire world listened, this would have been done by now. So I know me being optimistic of like, please people, but that's how I am, right? So so really quickly before we go back into that, I know in our personal conversations you've told me before whenever you were working with the Ebola outbreak.
Yes.
And so tell me how that was. And I know obviously that's under control, because I think that'll give us a good insight into the start, middle, and ending of an outbreak and what measures and stuff you did.
No, so I was one of the few DART teams that was essentially out there in parts of Eastern Africa, in specifically Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, and all of these Eastern African countries during the time when there was a huge Ebola strain outbreak, specifically what we call the Zaire Ebola strain. And this specific strain was absolutely decimating most of Eastern Africa. For those of you who aren't aware, as Ebola doesn't transmit like COVID, in the sense that, like, one, you have to be symptomatic or you have to show symptoms in order to transmit the disease. That's the first thing.
Hmm.
But when you do get Ebola, back in that time, it was almost a death sentence. And I'm not going to get into the details of like the very gruesome symptoms associated with it, but it was very difficult. And we also dealt with a lot of cultural issues as well, because a lot of the Eastern African countries did not trust a lot of the Western doctors and a lot of Western groups coming in to help out.
Hmm.
There were a lot of village leaders who basically said that, this was an issue that we don't want Westerners involved. One of the biggest transmissions that we've noticed was during burial times. Now, for those who aren't aware, in a lot of African countries, actually, the local villages, when a person passes, there is a bit of a ritual process where they wash the body. They wash the body, and it's a very tender scene. Like it's very beautiful. But unfortunately, if a person dies from Ebola, that becomes a huge hot zone in this case, for that Ebola virus to spread. So they were basically washing, touching their faces, and after that, not realizing that it was becoming a super spreader event. And that's what ended up happening over and over again, all these little spurts events. So one of our main efforts in there was basically, one, we wanted to ensure that we were instilling trust with the community there. That's the first thing, right? To say that we're not here to take over anything, we're here to help. And a lot of it involved us like really establishing links with local community members and the local populace.
Hmm.
It wasn't us coming in to say like, we're going to save you. It was us like, well, how can we help figure out the solution? And once we did that, you know what, the biggest change that we did that made the biggest difference was education. We sent people out with local leaders and we educated everyone. There's a really great YouTube video, which I'll have to get sometime, where it shows a lot.
If we put this on each of our YouTubes, make sure we're going to link that video down below then, so that if people watch this later on, they can watch that video. All right, sorry guys.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah. So a lot of these non-government organizations and like these like church groups, they went out and basically taught them like, hey, these are all the things you can do. Like, don't touch, the dead bodies, don't do this. And it made a huge difference, because when teaching a lot of the local populace of like what is causing a lot of the deaths, like it eventually like got around to that point. Now, we have luckily gotten to the point right now in our kind of like the disease life cycle where we do have a vaccine and we have a treatment for Ebola. Which is something amazing what's funny is that it happened last year that we discovered it, but it got covered up because of COVID and all the different news. But
yay, vaccine for Ebola.
Yay. So
yes, okay.
But we actually, so Democratic Republic of the Congo was like the last country to really experience this. It's a country, like a very big country in the middle of Africa that, a lot of you guys don't know, but those cell phones that you have, a lot of those precious minerals are mined from that country. So it's actually a very important country to know of. And they have a lot of civil wars going on, and they had a huge outbreak in the Kinshasa and kind of like the northern Kivu region. And so eventually what happened was that a bunch of people came in and we addressed the problem, and I don't think we've had a single transmission since identified transmission since then. So it's a big success story in the infectious disease world.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yay. But then that's important, because it's, as we're going through that story with your experience with Ebola, we are now in the education and vaccine phase where we just need to get more people to understand the facts and understand all of this and follow it. And then we can continue on. So that's awesome. I actually, you haven't told me, he hasn't told me the entire story yet, though. All I knew was that he did Ebola, and that was super fascinating. So, all right, so in there, so you had talked about there was a certain strain, and with strains like that. And I know that's the biggest thing that people are concerned with right now is with COVID,
yes.
Is with the different strains. There are a few questions that we have about the strains, but the number one is, how worried should we be about strains?
So in this case right here, we should be rightfully worried, but not stressed out, if that makes sense. I say this right now is that we now know there are three primary variants, and I know someone will bring in the California one, which we'll get into in a second, but there's three
Okay.
primary ones that originate or first identified outside of this country, the United States or Canada or any the North America region.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, it's making sure that we are not transmitting any further. Now, the first one, and I'll go through these three primary ones, and then I'll talk about the California one. There's one that we first identified in the United Kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
The B117. And if you can tell, I've been saying this a lot because I could just rattle these numbers off my head. So the B117 variant, as we like to call it. So just a quick terminology change. We usually call them variant. They're not, I don't, some people will call them strains. But I typically stick with variant in this example because usually strain implies a little bit difference. But don't stress out too much about that.
Okay.
So B117, we know that variant exists. We know the things that we know about it is that it is much more transmissible. So it's about 30 to 40 something percent more transmissible.
Okay.
And what that means is that basically let's say if I had the original, SARS-CoV-2 virus, and I have the B117, and I put them in two separate rooms. If that first room with the original virus would probably infect maybe 2-3 people. Instead, if we look at the UK variant or the B117, it would infect 10 people. So that's essentially what it would mean is that you would essentially more people would essentially get that virus, get the infection. And I want to make sure I explain that just because I know there's a lot of terminology thrown around. So that's what we mean by higher transmissibility.
Okay.
So now we know that it has a higher transmissibility, but we also know, luckily for right now, that most of our vaccines can actually prevent serious and really bad disease as a result of that variant. So that's a good thing. And the third big one is the fact that we have, even if you do not have a vaccine and you get infected with that variant, we haven't seen anything different in terms of like you get more severe symptoms or you're much more likelier to die as a result of it. It's about similar, so that's good.
Okay, you just have a higher chance of catching it, but it's
Correct.
not worse on you and your body.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. So now let's shift our focus then to South Africa. Okay. Where it was first identified. This other variant was identified. This is the one that brings a lot of worry for a lot of folks, including me. Now, the reason why I worry about it and others is that not only does it have a higher transmissibility, but it has shown to actually be a little more resistant to kind of our vaccines and are a little bit more resistant to kind of our immune system. So that's the first thing we got to worry about, right? It's because we know that this virus, it's mutating. It's basically adapting to us fighting back. That's what viruses do. This is just a natural course of things.
Okay.
And the third is the fact that we have seen, some cases of people who do have, higher chances of getting more severe symptoms as a result of it. That's not official in terms of like the actual data, but it's like we have observed incidences of it.
Okay.
Now shifting.
Now this is the one that you said on your Twitter that just popped up in Maryland, right?
Yes.
Okay, because as you know, my parents are in Maryland, so of course that's the concerning thing for me. So, okay, so let's talk about the third one, and then we can talk about other ways we can be safe with this stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, go ahead. So
and the final one is the P1, which is the one that's in Brazil.
Okay.
And we don't have much data regarding it. We know that it shares the same lineage or like kind of like the family tree as the South Africa variant. So, but we can educationally assume that because it is the same lineage that it's about similar in terms of like how it interacts and things like that, but we are still observing and doing additional studies on that. So
okay.
I won't go into too much detail, but we have seen all three variants in the United States. So they're here.
Right.
And chances are they're probably up in Canada and everywhere else. I mean, these viruses, unfortunately, they don't take a break. They're not on vacation. They just keep going, right? They don't observe holidays and say, I'm going to take a break. They just keep going. And so, yeah. There.
All right. So what about the California one that you mentioned? What's up?
Yeah.
What's that?
So California recently identified their own version of a variant, but I wouldn't even classify. I would say it's like almost like a subvariant, which is not really a word, because it kind of like takes a little bit of the UK variant or the
Mm-hmm.
B.1.17 and shifts it a little bit, probably a little bit more. But it is something that we're closely observing, making sure that it
Okay.
doesn't get out of control and it doesn't do anything different. But we haven't noticed any remarked difference in terms of like when people get infected with this.
Mm-hmm.
Does it do anything different? Does it is it more severe disease or anything as a result of it? So that's why you haven't heard much about it on the
Okay.
news as much.
So it's the 117, but a bunch of the letters have been changed, but not enough to change it yet.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say that.
See, I try to dumb it down as much as I can, so I know
You're
that
fine.
I understand it. So yeah, okay, all right. So with the obviously with the variants, let's take the vaccine out for right now. We'll
Sure.
talk about that in a few minutes. Imagine the vaccine doesn't exist yet. So we have our COVID, we have our variants, we have everything else. Now I don't leave my house. I stay home all day. My husband works from
Hmm.
here from home. The kid has a job. She has to leave the house and go to work.
Yeah.
And I go to the grocery store and to the post office, and that's about it. So we try to be as safe as we can and not go and do anything. But
Sure.
sometimes that can't be helped.
Of
Sometimes you
course.
do have to go out. So if you do have to go out into the public and be around people, other than social distancing and wearing that single cloth mask that we've made,
Hmm.
how do we keep ourselves safe? Like,
That's a good
do we have
question.
to like douse ourselves with hand sanitizer at all times of the day?
No, no, no. And I think like here's the thing is that so to really keep yourself safe, think about in this case right here of how we have to think about how the virus spreads. And so in this case, the more studies we've done, we know that this is spread through the air, point blank. Uh, we're actually, the science has shifted right now. And originally we were saying be concerned with surfaces, but we've started to realize that it's actually not as bad if you touch a surface. Obviously you don't want to touch your face or anything, but it's not as bad if you touch a surface that has, the
Right.
virus. It takes a lot. But we know that in the air, it's usually out in the air for several hours and can travel, obviously, with wind and all this sort of stuff. So we have to think about that.
Okay.
Um, Now, in order for you to really keep safe, several things. If you So let's talk about outdoors. Then we
Mm-hmm.
shift our discussion to indoors.
Okay.
Outdoors, social distancing is absolutely the best way, but also really keeping aware about your surroundings, who is wearing a mask, who's not, and also making sure that if you don't even have access to a good like high quality mask like a KN95 or an N95, those are like the ones that everyone wants. There are ways that you can get, and they're cheap online. You can get a cloth mask and a surgical mask, and you could double mask
Okay.
as well. So those are another way to do it.
Because I know we were talking here in Canada, supplies are still super short. Like I can't get my
Hmm.
hands on the K95 or the KN95s at all. So,
Right.
and I normally just do a cloth mask, but I know we
Hmm.
had talked that no, get a surgical, and then because I can get my hands on those, and then
Hmm.
double mask it up.
Yep.
So,
And that's
okay.
another way to do it. And that's something that we can also start thinking about from like when we're walking around and everything, and really just being cautious, much more cautious about our surroundings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So and now let's kind of shift to indoors. Now, this is where it gets tricky because when we get indoors, we have to think about a lot more things.
Mm-hmm.
The first big primary one, which is something I always tell anyone, if you are in any enclosed space or any indoor space, how good is the ventilation? Do you feel that AC running? Do you feel air running around? Or is it very stagnant? Is it very dry, stagnant air
Mm-hmm.
that's in there? Those are very different and can make a difference in terms of how safe that area is. And so if you go in and you notice that there's no air ventilation, that's a very dangerous area to be in, really, because that's actually where the virus probably will be suspended in the air much longer as a
Mm-hmm.
result of it. So that's the big thing. One of the many things I've had gripes with recently is we've seen a lot of restaurants, they've been trying to do outdoor eating. What they've done is like they've built these like little bubble tents that have no holes, no air flowing through it,
I've
and
seen
people are,
those. Yep.
yeah, and people will eat in there, and they'll eat there for maybe 2-3 hours, and then they leave, and then the person comes and wipes the table, and then another group comes in.
Yeah.
So what's the problem right there?
Well, you just said that it's spread through the air and it can linger. If you have
Yeah,
no mask and you're sitting there and then the next person comes in at the same table.
yeah. And that's a big problem, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the many issues we're starting to see here is that ventilation is very big. So making sure that that's the case, and really that, and then
So
obviously
and so basically you're saying it's actually safer to if you need to eat at a restaurant. That's a whole nother thing that I would go, yeah. If you need to eat in a restaurant, it's safer to eat inside a restaurant that's well ventilated than in one of those outdoor bubbles.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
obviously making sure you're social distance and everything.
Yes.
But I know a lot of places have recently been doing the 25% out indoor eating. I'm going to voice my professional opinion in here, and is that
Mm-hmm.
I still don't think it's safe. Given the fact that we've seen a lot of these variants out in the wild and they're out there, and they don't care if you got to go to work the next day or you want to enjoy your, $15 sushi, but um, these are things we have to think about. And it's much more dangerous times to think about a lot of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so those are the different things I could think about. Much more recently, and I've been looking at from household perspective, is there are certain things you can do to make your house safer for.
Oh, yes, you were telling me about these. I'm excited. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, no, no. These are great.
Yeah.
So these are things that I've been recently doing. Now, there are certain things you can do to really make sure that you're much more better prepared in terms of that. One, really invest
Guys,
in
he said more better. He said
more
more
better.
better.
I know. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Calling me out on
I
this.
joke about that. All right, so go ahead. So
I
things you can do in
know.
your house.
That makes it better. That makes it
It
better.
makes it more better.
Much, much better.
Yeah.
Now, you can invest in a portable HEPA air filter. So that's the first thing, right? And I actually tell that to everyone, especially it's even better, especially if you have pets and you have allergies. It's a 2-for-1. You really can't go wrong. And really like invest in one. I have one that's like right behind here that
Yep.
utilize that basically filters the air and make sure that it's a HEPA certified. So it actually has to be, and what that means is that it filters out the air for a certain size of particles.
Okay.
And so let's say it happens where you are infectious or you do bring in a whiff of that air that has a viral particle, I'm just making an example, that filter will just suck it right up. So it's good to have one around the house.
Oh, so that would be even great for someone that has to quarantine themselves within a house. If you have a member that you have to quarantine, stick a HEPA in there, and that'll actually help keep there. Nice.
Or maybe stick it outside their door as well. Make sure that there's like a bit of a buffer, safe area, because
so if you
yeah, so that's a good thing to have. Now, and the other thing that just recently been kind of like we've been documenting in some of this in reports and things like that, where one of my colleagues and a very well-respected virologist, Dr. Kiko Iwasaki, she recently did a very thorough analysis showing that keeping your house at a 40 to 60% humidity range is actually beneficial because it actually keeps it basically keeps the virus from spreading.
I actually, when you told me this the other day, I was explaining it to my kid today, and she kind of looked at me. I was like, and this is how I explained it in the dumbed down, non-sciencey way. And correct me if I'm wrong with this. It's by putting more moisture into the air, it fills it so that it's heavier and the virus can't travel through as much. Is that a good way to? Okay.
Yeah, it's about it. I mean, like it's usually when it's like higher. It's usually when it's less humidity and it's drier air.
Okay.
The viral particles can spread a lot faster and a lot wider as a result of that.
Air soup. I like that. Air soup. It's air soup. It's creating air soup. I can't.
And one of the things I've recently told people, like, there's this handy little like sensor that I bought. This one, it's like $10. Like it measures your indoor humidity and the temperature in your house. I keep it around just to kind of really check. I've been doing, better things like if I'm showering, I keep the door cracked so then, the steam comes out and it
Okay.
raises the relative humidity. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of like make sure that you're safe.
Yeah, that's what
And
I was going to
so
ask. How can we increase the humidity in our homes without actually going out and getting a humidifier?
So there's the shower,
Okay.
if you want to do that, and also in your kitchen when you're cooking, what you can do too is boil like a big pot of water.
Okay.
Also, sometimes keeping plants around the house. If you have plants that are pet
I
safe,
kill plants.
I know. Well,
Uh,
if you want to keep plants and not kill them in the
okay.
process, they actually generate a lot of humidity in a house as well.
Okay.
And or if you want to just go with the very simple method of just keeping a bowl of water around, just let it evaporate in the air. That helps to do that. But those are different ways. Those are different little ways you can do to create like a little bit of a humidity buffer in your
Mm-hmm.
house. And like I said, this is for more people who are concerned about, if you have a household that has a lot of people going in and out, who have essential jobs and things like that need to go out and do
Right.
stuff. These are different things you can do. But if, in this case right here, where like if you're in a household where all of you guys are isolating and you're not really
Mm-hmm.
going out as much, like don't stress about not getting any of these things. Like if you can get one or two, that's fine. But don't stress out too much because I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, I need to have all of this. And I tell
Mm-hmm.
them, it's really about it's context specific in terms of like what you know as your kind of like your work environment,
Okay.
or your household environment and how risky it is. And if you feel that it is something where you need to have all of it, then by all means. Same thing with the masking as well. A
Okay.
single mask is, by the way, to everyone, I want to make sure everyone understands, a single mask is still actually pretty viable. The virus hasn't mutated to the point where it can rip through the mask. It's not like it's gonna like tear apart the fabrics that Tony has put all together and everything. This virus is just basically it's just what you're doing when you're double masking is that you're making it harder for it to essentially navigate to your mouth or your nasal passages. You're just making it a little bit more difficult.
Okay.
So again, think about from the perspective of how much risk you're going to be in,
Mm-hmm.
how risky is your home situation, and just in general, what are you bringing home?
Right.
Really.
Okay. All right. And then now you had said that the science has shifted away. It's not doesn't live on surfaces that long. It's more in the air. So I know back when this all started in March, we all took our packages, set them aside for 24 hours, pulled them
Mhm.
out, sanitized them, and then opened our things up. We don't have to do that anymore, right? Like if our postman is bringing us a package, it's not going to be on the package, right?
I wouldn't even. I have not wiped my packages down ever. Now, what I would do, like, I would still, at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
or if, and I still do this when I go in and out, like when I go out to get a package or when I go out to get a mail. If I go out for a walk or anything, I come back.
Mm-hmm.
I still wash my hand, right?
Yep.
It's still good
Yep.
practice to have, because it's not just COVID that's out in the world, guys. There's the flu. The flu is still out there, and so
Yep.
are any other viruses and infections that are out there. And it's good to just have that practice, but don't go overboard.
Okay.
Just think really, like I said, think about what you're doing, how risky it is to kind of your response.
Okay.
And, too much of a good thing is bad. So.
Okay. All right. So don't go overboard so we don't make it worse. Got it. Okay. All right. So there was a couple. All right. So back to the variants. I'm looking through the
Sure,
questions. I know we addressed a bunch of this already. I'm just going through all the variant questions to see if we hit
sure,
them all.
sure,
Okay. Oh, here's the good question that
sure.
I told you about with the variants. So, do you think that the South Africa SARS variant was a parallel mutation rather than an import? Now, they said they know it's impossible without the contact tracing, but they just wanted to know your opinion on that.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest and say that we don't know yet. That's a very honest answer
Okay.
to you, is that we don't know yet. There's still a lot of investigation. This is where
Yeah.
epidemiology comes in. We're still investigating a lot of this. So I and this is something that I'm very if you can tell a good science communicator, by the way, from
Mm-hmm.
like a lot, is that the ones who are open to saying I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
So
Well, see, and this is someone that I know within the science community, which I told you about, and they said
sure.
they just want to they have a curiosity itch that they're just kind of like wondering where would this come from, and yeah. So I
Yeah, I mean, like, and and the thing is that for parallel mutations, I mean,
yeah.
like, it's possible, based on some of the evidences. So I'm not going to rule that
Mm-hmm.
out. So, we've seen
Okay.
some of the similarities between the Brazil variant versus the South Africa variant.
Mm-hmm.
There's theories centering around that, but again, I guess like for the average person who's worried about this, like in terms of like how they're mutating and things like that, these don't really affect how we as the general public are addressing them.
Okay.
Like we're
All
still
right.
masking, we're still doing our thing. I guess this is more for like the nerds in the background. What do we know
Yes,
about it?
see, and that's what I'm saying, and that's what I told you. This is someone that I know, and she's a nerd, so it's kind of like
Mhm.
a yeah. They just wait, I get to actually ask someone that knows some of these things, what they think. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean,
Um.
I think there is some. I mean, I think we can go back and say that there is some. There is definitely thoughts in terms of the thought processes with the parallel mutation,
Right.
but it's still something like TBD.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. All
Hmm.
right. So, um, susceptibility. So this is something that we talk about a lot. And I actually heard someone say this on the radio the other day, and I think I'm going to start adopting it myself.
Hmm.
All of the talk about, well, pre-existing conditions. To
Hmm.
me, I hate that because it's you're laughing, so you probably yeah. It is. You know what? We're human, so we all have pre-existing conditions. It doesn't matter. It's if you have something that this helps exasperate it, great. But if you didn't catch it, then it wouldn't have been exasperated and whatever. But I know that there's certain people that are more afraid of catching it than others
Hmm.
because of their pre-existing conditions because of their stuff. Is so people with asthma. So I know I've told you before, my husband has horrible asthma.
Hmm.
He takes medicine on a daily basis. So with someone with asthma, would they be more susceptible if they caught COVID to worse conditions?
I don't think
Not
it's
conditions. Yeah.
so I don't even know if the susceptibility is the correct terminology here.
Okay.
Now your husband in this case right here would be a prime candidate for someone who could possibly have a serious like comorbidity or something where if something does happen and he does have get the COVID disease
Mm-hmm.
as a result of it, it could lead to a lot of complications, a lot of issues down the line.
Okay.
Susceptibility, when we talk about that, we usually say it in a sense of people who have weaker immune system.
Okay.
So, and you're kind of right in the terminology here. So, but let's talk about more severe, severe kind of like immune system issues. So, if you have something where your immune system's already working at 80% capacity, dealing with a current disease,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get COVID, that's not something your immune system's going to want to deal with, right? It's like it's already juggling with two hands, all this other stuff going on. And
Right.
then it's just like, oh, here, by the way, here's another box. It's COVID. Handle this one.
So
And it's
is that like I hear sometimes people in the hospital that then are in the hospital and they get pneumonia on top of that, and then that's what kills them because their body just can't juggle everything all at the same time?
so that's kind of like one of the what we call the cascade effect, essentially. So when you get the virus, then it causes that. That's like
Okay.
one of the many, like I guess, like routes that it can pursue. What we call the cytokine storm, which is essentially where like your immune system is just like on high overdrive, and it actually harms your body in the process.
Okay.
There's a lot of different things that can happen once you do get the disease.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously these are for like the really severe cases right now.
Okay.
So and I don't want to scare anyone here. It's like, oh my God, this is going to happen to me. These are just some of the remarked cases of that. A lot of people will probably mostly experience mild symptoms, but it's the severe ones we do worry about, and the ones that we're having to deal with.
Right. Okay. All right. That makes sense. So then shift to vaccine
Mm-hmm.
for there's all this talk about who gets it first, the order of it, everything else
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter which brand. We can go into all that stuff later, but overall, if your body is that if your body is combating all of these issues,
Mm-hmm.
should you get the vaccine? Would it help or would it hurt?
So that's a fantastic question. For certain people who are immunocompromised, or those
Mm-hmm.
who have like these like other diseases, some of them might not be eligible for this vaccine because this
Okay.
might be too much. So those are the people we really have to protect, right? Because we want to make sure that everyone else is not, going crazy with this virus,
Mm-hmm.
and these people are okay. So that's the reason why, like, one of the many strategies is initially we want to ensure that we're vaccinating our healthcare workers.
Okay.
They don't have a choice. They're going out in the field where they are treating patients left and right, all that stuff. So that's the first one. And then the second groups are the elderly patients, so
Mm-hmm.
65 and above. And that because they do have weaker immune system. Your immune
Right.
system doesn't exactly stay at a level. It goes down over time.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, then what we do is move further into it. The remaining people, which are like the essential workers, your grocery staff, or your librarians, or things like that, who do still have to do their daily work, and interact with people. We want to make sure that they're vaccinated. And then eventually it moves down to children, and then the rest of the
Right.
people. So there
Okay.
is a thought process that goes into it, but we have to think about, in this case right here, it's just like who um who will be engaging in much more riskier like
Right.
potential activity, and how do we ensure that they are protected as a result of it. And
Okay.
I think right now we're in a bit of a between a rock and a hard place, because now we're seeing these variants come up.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want these variants to get any. We don't want to hear more variants come up, right? Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to hear that there's a Florida variant or there's a new variant. We don't want to hear
There's a
these things.
Texas variant. Yeah.
We don't want to hear these, because the thing, I
Right.
mean, in terms of like, we do want to hear it, but it's like we don't want to like have to deal with it, because uh the more chances that it has to mutate, the less there's a chance that it might make our vaccines less effective, and that will require us to have to go back to the drawing board, figure out what we need to do to tweak the formula. Maybe we have to give booster shots to people, maybe we need to
Right.
give them again. And these are challenges that we can avoid so much by just making sure that we are practicing a lot of these measures that aren't, that don't require vaccines or medicine.
Right. Okay. Because I don't know if I've ever told you, my mother, who is 70, has Crohn's disease.
uh,
And so not only is she of an age where she's at risk, but she has a compromised immune system.
right.
But it's interesting because I know we were talking about I was talking with Vicky, my manager, about the medicine that they have found successful, and a lot of it they're giving it to Crohn's patients. So,
Mm,
like, part of me is like, oh, well, maybe. So I know I've had a conversation with her. She has to talk to her doctor. As much as she's gung ho for the vaccine, talk to your doctor. Make sure it's going to be okay.
absolutely, yeah.
So,
No, that's actually the primary. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's like the
yeah.
primary. That is the primary kind of punchline to this, is that, like, if you are questioning about it, really, and there's a lot of like hotlines that you can go and ask as
Okay.
well, or you can message me if you want to. But like, there's a lot of places where you can go directly to ask, like, hey, I have this,
Right.
can I take this? and we will tell you like if it's something to be concerned about in this
Right.
case right here. And or just go directly to your primary care doctor if you have access to one.
Right. And of course, I want to also point out Neuro's team that he works with. Their website is thecovidactnow.org, which we have down below under his name.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got right there his Twitch, when he does at least monthly talks where he does questions and answers to the public, and Twitter. And he's going to be doing more with his YouTube coming up.
Hopefully.
Yes. So yeah, so you have access to him if you have these questions, if you can't get a hold of your primary care, or if your primary care is not giving you the answers. I know it's again, we have a friend of ours that was fighting with their primary care doctor about, giving them straight answers and listening to them. So it's just something that hopefully now we all have another avenue that we can go for understanding and education. So I know the biggest concern that I had, and the reason why I brought up, talk to your doctor, make sure before you take it, is I know I read an article whenever the vaccine was first coming out in Europe, and you know where I'm going with this probably, they immediately gave it to the most susceptible, sick patients immediately, and there was quite a few deaths within that small little group. And that's something where it was the gung-ho, yay, we have a vaccine, let's give it to everyone. And and again, if your body is fighting all these different things and you're introducing something else, it's talk to your doctor first, honestly.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I would equate it to something like, let's say if you have a light bulb, it's being powered up by your regular electricity. If I were to jolt it even more, what happens to that poor light bulb?
Yeah. Yep.
So again, there's always a predominant theory, the predominant practice really, or mindset is that too much of something is bad.
Yeah.
It's all about balancing factors, by making sure that we're balancing our response to what we're dealing with. And I think that unfortunately that's a practice that a lot of people have in a lot of the Western world, is that let's just throw as much as we can at it and hopefully something sticks. And I'm sitting here going like, no. That's not how this works here.
Oh my gosh, no, that's not how science works. Yeah, no, I'm laughing because I've seen that too. It's just, all right, so let's say if, now, virus. Two things that I know that I've been talking to people about. The first thing that I see is people go, wait, hold on. They made this really, really fast. So fast, it must not be safe. They must have cut corners. How did they get this out so fast? And how do we know that, yes, this is safe?
So that's a fantastic question. It's actually one of the many grounds for a lot of misinformation out there. It is true. I want to first set the precedent that we developed this at record speed. Absolutely. We at record time, not even speed. Let me excuse my terminology here. We less than a year. First thing I want to preface is that the technologies that utilize, so I want to specifically talk about the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, because those are two main ones that we've seen out there. There's a couple other ones that might be coming out soon.
Okay.
So the Pfizer and Moderna use a technology called mRNA technology, or messenger ribonucleic acid technology. That technology actually has been around for about a good decade or so. It's not new. It's been around for a good hot minute. And what we basically did was take this technology and just imagine then that everyone, not just the one or two big pharmaceutical companies, you have all the universities, all the independent labs, all the government labs, all working on the same problem set, and also getting money. Like we had money thrown left and right to solve this problem. That's what happened here, is that we had this is the ideal situation where if everyone put their minds together, if you had unlimited resources, what can we accomplish? And I know I'm skipping some details in terms of like the efficiency factor here, because there were certain steps we took to make sure that we could utilize this in a much better way, and we did that. And this is an example. This is actually an example case of like what happens in an ideal walled green world where we have everything that we need and everyone works together. And that's what happened with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine and all these other groups, is that we really pumped every resource that we could possibly do. And unfortunately, a little bit of jealous me inside is thinking like, man, what can we do if we all put our minds together to fix problems like cancer or
Mm-hmm.
all these other problems? But unfortunately, this is the stuff that really kind of, in this case, what I call hit the pocketbooks of everyone. It started becoming an economic issue. So everyone
Right.
started realizing this is something we all need to tackle. So you had every country in the world, it doesn't matter. You had UK, you had Germany, you had Russia, you had China, South Korea, Japan, most of South America and the United States and Canada, all throwing your resources at this problem.
Yeah.
So we have seen something remarkable in this case, and I will honestly say that too. We didn't skip any safety steps.
Mm-hmm.
We were very rigorous, and I can tell you right now, one of the companies that got pumped a lot of money recently said we're abandoning our vaccine because we realized after going through all our studies and all of our data that it's not safe. And a lot of people think like, oh no, that's one less vaccine that's in the world.
Well,
And in my
if it's not safe, you don't want it in the world.
Absolutely. But that's a good
That's
thing
yeah.
because this is a demonstration that the scientific process
Mm-hmm.
works and that our process is there to make sure it's safe. Because if it's really not safe, we're not going to push it out.
Right.
It's not in, even if we think about it in a capitalist or everyone's like saying these pharmaceuticals are for money, like it doesn't make sense for these companies to, make money off of things that is going to end up harming people. Like
Right.
it's actually not going to look good for them.
No.
So if that's where your argument is going to come in, that's not the case here. And I will say also too, like a lot of these safety things that they're utilizing,
Mm-hmm.
they haven't skipped any step, which is why there is like they don't produce these vaccines at such a rapid rate, like as like at astronomical rate. They are doing as fast as they humanly can without sacrificing the safety process.
Right.
Do it. And so there's a lot that can be unpacked here, but I want to ensure everyone who is watching this off of YouTube, who is watching this right now, that every step was taken to ensure that things were safe. We just had
Okay.
This is like an example situation where all the cards were placed in the right area and we were ready to go from day one,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone was, you know, working on the same problem set.
That's awesome. Now, you had mentioned that the technology that they use for this vaccine has been around, but I
Mm-hmm.
know it's different than other vaccines because I know
Mm-hmm.
when we're children and we get the vaccine for. I'm trying to think of the vaccines that we get now. It's been so long since I've had to take a child to get vaccines. Rubella, mumps,
Yeah, the MMR vaccine and
yeah.
all these.
So with those vaccines, we're actually being injected a dead version of the vaccine so that our body can then get its defenses up. So if it ever sees it, it goes, "Oh, hello, no, no, we're
Mm-hmm.
fine. We're taking care
Mm-hmm.
of that." But that's not how the COVID one works, right? We're not actually being injected with a dead COVID.
Correct. We're
Okay.
not. What we've been essentially what the mRNA vaccine does is that it takes a very small snippet of a genetic code,
Okay.
and it's not even like a genetic code. And that's another thing I'll talk about in a second. It's a small genetic code that gets into your cells,
Mm-hmm.
and what it does is that your cells have these things called ribosomes. They're like one of the organs inside those
Are those
cells.
the things with like the little hairs if you look at it in the microscope? I'm trying to
No,
remember back to my science.
they're kind of like I would say like they're like two beans with a mouth, like a bean with a mouth, I
Oh,
guess.
okay, the bean. Okay, I'm trying to remember my science pictures of how things look. So the bean mouth. Okay, all right.
And so basically what it does is that it sees this genetic code and they're like, okay, I'm gonna take this genetic code because
Mm-hmm.
it gives me instructions, and I'm gonna create this spike protein. Now, what is the spike protein? The SARS-CoV-2 virus
Mm-hmm.
has essentially the way that it infects people is that it has like a spike on its surface. And what it does is that it connects with our body cells and infects it that way.
Okay.
And so that it's basically that surface. And then I'll look at it as a triangle right there. We want to make sure that we're creating this little spike protein. And what we do is that once we create it, that mRNA, by the way, goes away after a few hours. It doesn't stay in your body.
Okay.
that spike protein comes out of your cell after you produce it, and then your immune system, let's say this white blood cell comes along, eats it up, and it realized, because it says it's a foreign body, right? So it's going to eat it up, and then what it does is it trains your body to be like, oh, this is not something I want in my body. This is not what I want. And so what happens then is that now it knows when the SARS-CoV-2 virus comes in, it's like, that's an intruder.
Okay.
Focus on that one. And
Okay.
so now the mRNA, I would like to call it, it's essentially the Snapchat of the vaccines. It comes in, shows the genetic code, and it goes away after a while. It says, okay, guys, this is the virus protein. Be careful of this one, okay? All right, I'm done. See you later. Bye. And it walks away.
Okay.
And so one of the biggest conspiracy theories people say is like, oh, well, it enters your cell. It's going to change your genetic code. It's going to mutate you and everything.
I haven't heard
now,
that one.
that was one of the big ones when the mRNA vaccine first came out. Now, here's the thing. Your DNA, which is what makes you, is in the nucleus of the cell. Okay, it's the heart and soul of your cell. That mRNA can't get in, or it can't get in the nucleus.
Right.
It's impossible for it to get into the nucleus.
Right.
So your DNA, I can guarantee you, is protected. It's not going to change. You're not going to turn into Wolverine. As cool as it sounds, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And again, this mRNA, it goes away after a while. It doesn't stay in your body. It doesn't want to stay in your body. It's done.
So is that why first of all, is that why the two ones we have right now, I know they're saying that there's another one that may come out, we only need one shot, but the two that are out right now that we have 2 shots is because it has to really train your body, and it's not, I'm trying to say it the correct way.
No, you're fine.
So the 2 shots are training. So the first shot introduces it, and then the second shot kind of reminds it and trains it and keeps it in its memory for a good period of time.
I would say it trains it a little bit more. So
okay, trains it more. Okay.
So let's talk a little bit of why we have 2 shots here. So when your first shot, what happens is that it's basically like the initial boot camp for your immune system. And you usually you produce these antibodies, you produce things that essentially protect you, right? And it goes up to about 50-something% what we call effectiveness here. And so now we want to get the best out of it, right? So getting the second shot pushes it up to the 90 percentile range, which is phenomenal, by the way, in the vaccine world, to get that type of numbers. And so, of course, we want to get to that level. We want to get as much protection as we can. And so after getting the second shot, typically people start experiencing symptoms or side effects around that time period. But after a few weeks, your immune system is really trained. It has gone to the gym several weeks, is ready to, do push-ups with his pinky. I mean, it is geared and ready to go, and it stays strong for quite some time and is ready to go against the virus. And that's kind of like where we really want to go with this. Now, the other vaccines, we have seen that they're trying to aim for a singular shot. That's one. It's obviously it's easier because if you just get one shot, it's easy. Right. So
and you can do more people, but yeah, I think I'd rather have effectiveness.
Right. And I mean, they're still effective. A lot of people have been worried about the numbers and percentages and things like that. And I say this with a lot of people here in my specialty is that really, if you have a chance to get the vaccine that's available out there, and obviously you could do some additional research, don't stress out too much about the numbers. Getting the vaccine is better than nothing.
Right.
So those of you who are worried about the Johnson & Johnson or the Novavax vaccine, they might not offer that like 90 percentile range, but 60 to something percent and above is actually, it's actually fantastic if you think about it. It's very like the flu vaccine, which again, different virus, different mechanism. So don't try to equate these two, but the flu vaccine doesn't even offer like that type of percentages and a lot of that stuff. So we have to think about in this case of like, one, we really want to make sure that, beggars can't be choosers here in this situation.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. I think I understand all that. That's actually really neat with that. So this is why after a while, if this is still around, we may need boosters
Correct.
because you want to keep your immune system ramped up and
Hmm.
buffed up so that it can just kind of ward it off.
Yeah, and the thing
Okay.
is that like think of it this way, especially like you know, let's say if the virus mutates even further, which might happen or probably
Mm-hmm.
will. Um, so your immune system, I'm just gonna make a funny example. Let's say Tony, it knows Tony, and Tony's the virus.
Mm-hmm.
It says, okay, I know Tony got purple hair and has this gray sweater. I know that person. And so then Tony realizes, oh no, this
Uh-huh.
immune system knows who I am. So what am I going to do?
I'm gonna
I'm going to dye
change.
my hair. I'm
Yeah.
going to dye my hair pink.
Yeah.
I'm going to dye my hair white. And I'm going to change my shirt. And it comes back in, and the immune system's like, I don't know who
Okay.
this person is, and so and I'm putting these things into a little simplistic form, but that's essentially
Right.
what
But no, but
we're
that's what I
doing.
want. I
Yeah.
want you to simplify it so that not just me, but that everyone can truly understand. And this is why I wanted to bring you on because you do that. You've been explaining these things to me
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
simple terms, which is great.
Yeah.
So not everyone can be like the child who is all into science and eats all that stuff up and understands all the I don't understand those
Yeah,
complex
yeah, yeah.
terms. Yeah. um,
Understood.
so it is so the biggest thing with this vaccine, obviously, it's not a dead virus. It's not so it's beefed up. So if we've had the vaccine and we get COVID, so we're exposed to COVID, we can
Hmm.
still be a carrier for it because all that it's done is it's beefed up our system and said, yeah, no, we're going to be able to fight you, but we still have it's still here, it's still present, right?
Um, so this is where it gets into the challenge right here. This is where science communication gets a little tricky, right?
Yeah, because there's
Um,
a bunch of different things about that. About should we
mhm.
continue to mask? Should we continue to do this and this and this if we have vaccines? And so that's
Absolutely.
yeah.
And so I'll tell you right now that regardless of if you have the vaccine or not, you're still masking, you're still social distancing, you're not going on these big club raves with 50 other
But
people
I
in one
want
enclosed room.
to.
I know, but
Okay.
unfortunately we can't.
All
And
right.
because the thing is that we still don't have 100%, and I say this, we don't have 100% certainty regarding one, how long does that immunity last after
Okay.
you get the vaccine? So second, also, we don't know what the extent of transmissibility, once again,
Hmm.
that word, we don't know the extent of transmissibility after the vaccine. Now, we know that it prevents some of it, but we don't know exactly how much or
Okay.
how, like, how, I guess, like, powerful it is. So we don't want to give those numbers out because we don't know yet, right? It's very hard to measure
Okay.
these factors until we get more people vaccinated and we have better understanding of how it happens. And so that helps.
Okay, so this is a treat it like you haven't gotten the vaccine yet because we don't have enough data to understand it yet and to see
Absolutely.
what happens. Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. So I understand because I'm getting all these different things and there you should do this, but no, you should do this and it's like why?
Hmm.
I like to know the whys. Why? What's the whys behind this? Tell me. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's hard.
Fantastic.
It's
Okay.
hard, and I know that there's a lot of information out there, but I will always press in my professional opinion that it's always best to be safe in practice, all of these measures that we've been doing beforehand because
Okay.
they do work. Absolutely, all of these things do work. We just need to keep them up and make sure that we're not, letting our guard down because
Mm-hmm.
having the vaccine does not necessarily mean you can drop all the things down. Like one of my favorite diagrams is like, and I showed this on another stream, is like this, and you probably can't see it, but um, it's this Swiss
Ooh, we
cheese.
can see it.
So it's the Swiss cheese model.
Uh
It's one of
huh.
my favorite like infectious disease diagram. So much to the point where I have a coffee mug and have this little placard sitting here. It says that it basically means that, in order for us to stop a pandemic, it takes multiple things, not just a vaccine. That's not the end all be all. It takes, masking.
Mm-hmm.
social distancing, education, information and information sharing, all these things. And only then can we stop a pandemic.
Okay.
And that's the critical thing here. And I wish I could take credit for this diagram. I mean, I'm white
Oh,
right now,
it's funny.
but
In our live chat, we already have a bunch of links into. They can actually go and look at the Swiss cheese model. So
yeah,
they've got that. And I'll make sure for YouTube that we link them down below too, so that you can
yeah,
actually take a look at those. That's
and
cool.
that credit goes to Dr. Ian McKay, who's a very very popular, well-renowned virologist, and I fangirl every time he responds to my tweets. So
I think you told me
if
that
he's
the other day too. You're like, I'm fangirling over this.
it's a nerd
Yes.
fangirling. That's
Oh,
what I do.
we're all nerds here. It's okay. We can we. Do you know how much I nerd fangirl over fabric when it comes out? Oh my gosh, you should see the latest Northcott fabrics that are coming out. Oh my gosh. Oh wait, you did. I should. Oh
I
yeah,
did.
yeah,
You did. I
yes.
saw.
We have
Yeah.
robots and robotic fabric coming out, guys. Okay, fangirl moment. Okay, so anyway, all right. So with that, I like this question. As a younger person under 30, because they know that I'm in my 40s, as a younger person with underlying conditions, at what point do you think it's appropriate for them to get the vaccine? So, do you think that they should talk to their doctors now to possibly get it earlier, or because they're under 30, they should wait a bit, let more, the older, the frontline workers, people like that get it until they get in line?
That's a great question. First things first, really assess again the type of risks, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
you in a situation where you're working from home 24/7 and you really don't go out that much, which is what most people should be doing anyways, if you can. If you're in that case, then maybe you can wait.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, right, in the situation where if you are an essential worker, you're out there a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and you do have these, and it also depends on the underlying condition that you have as well. It is something you should discuss with your health, your primary care doctor, to see whether if you are one of the eligible groups after, phase one or phase two.
Okay.
It all depends on the condition. It also depends on the context of your home and work environment. I would say that honestly, a lot of my colleagues, who are just, they're data junkies. They're just going to stay home.
Right.
They're in the age bracket, but they said that they're like, I don't leave. I have my groceries delivered. I'm staying home all this time. I'm waiting, and that's fine. It's again, this is part of the choice of, the matter of fact right here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Fantastic. And then, so with the vaccine situation, I know we've talked that there is a lovely shortage of vaccines now in Canada. That we are not getting as many as we thought we were going to get. That all of a sudden our supply has been cut. But that's a whole political background, whatever. But it's right now we do just have the two companies that are producing these vaccines.
Right.
At what, and I know we've talked about this before, which is why I want to bring it up for everyone else. At what point do you think I can join you for brunch and I can give you a hug without any concerns and we can hang out and do stuff together, basically almost going back to normal? We can do conventions. At what point the percentage of the population needs to be inoculated before we can get back to that?
So first things, there's a level nuances to the question, by the way,
Sorry.
that no, 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 this
Yeah.
is good. These
Okay.
are good. So I want to make sure that, in order for us to get to the point where it is safe, we need to think not just the northern hemisphere or the western
Mm-hmm.
hemisphere. We need to think about the rest of the country. So
Right.
all globally wise, we need to get to 70, 75, maybe even a little bit more if I could, percent of people who have the vaccine. And that's at that point, I would say, is that when we could really, quote unquote, get back to normal, or we can go about our business and things like that.
Okay.
Second, being the fact that we are doing our due diligence and really monitoring and making sure that we are, making sure like every year or every 2 years that if we need to get the injection, again, we're well aware of it.
Okay.
And the third is just the fact that in terms of timeline wise, I don't think we will get to that point until maybe early 2022.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and that's
So
that's what I was going to ask. Is the biggest thing right now in my world, in the convention world, is what's going to be the first big convention that's going to happen, and and that's the big debate that everyone's happening, and it's in my opinion, nothing's going to happen until 2022.
I
I
would
yeah.
I wouldn't for big conventions. I'm going to be honest. If I were to be in a board to review these items, which PAX East, if you want me to, or any other companies, if you need me to come on board to evaluate your safety procedures, there,
Or
uh,
Gen Con or Dragon Con or yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's safe for large conventions until maybe late next year,
Right.
late 2022. We just are not at the point right now where I feel confident
Right.
that everything will be monitored. And also keep in mind, there's still some unknowns we don't know about yet, right? Like we don't
Right.
know if there might be a new variant that might come down the line. We don't know how long this vaccine's going to work. We don't know if we need to get other shots or anything of the sort. There's a lot of uncertainty around here, which is why whenever you ask any of these experts, like we're always so hesitant to say a timeline.
Right.
And I and when I remember I was first asked this question last year,
Mm-hmm.
and people were gawking at me when I said, "Oh well,
At least. Yeah.
you'd be lucky if 2021." And people were like, "Well, these vaccines just got approved in December." I'm like, "Well, vaccine distribution is a lot trickier than you think. It's a
Yes.
lot trickier, and
As people are finding out now. Yeah.
correct. And again, this isn't something that we all didn't know. We all knew that these were the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's why many times when people ask me, I'm like, well, these take some time for us to ramp up. And keep in mind, once again, all these pharmaceutical companies are already at maximum capacity, like they're turned up to 100%, producing as much vaccines as possible.
Right.
And we just need to be doing a better job of really identifying certain socioeconomic brackets,
Mm-hmm.
ethnicities that are vulnerable. There's been, very unfortunate studies showing, and this is just more of like systemic medical issues where Black and Latino communities are disproportionately affected by lower healthcare, and we're starting to see that with the COVID vaccine. Is that they're a lot less of them getting vaccinated, and part of it is just distrust with the community, which is warranted, and also just the fact that we're just not doing enough to address it. It's always the rich countries and usually we've seen some disturbing reports of people who are trying to bribe doctors to give them the vaccine, and we just need
Mm-hmm.
to make sure we're controlling these gates, and we're making sure we're controlling distribution so that we are really giving it to the most vulnerable people first and then getting to the rest of the population. Right now, your parties, your raves, your conventions will have to wait,
Right.
unfortunately, until 2022.
Okay. Yeah, and it's funny. So we're a bunch of nerds in this household.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever this first came out, so probably I would say May, June. We're in COVID. They're talking about vaccines. They're doing all the research. The child and I actually went and researched when's the last time that we all waited for a vaccine. It was polio.
Yeah.
And so we actually researched it, and we actually looked at how long it took for them to get the polio vaccine. How long was the implementation? 3 years. And when it finally came out, there were people lined up around the block. They would stand in line until they would run out of the vaccine and come back next week. Come back next week. And it's something that this is not the first time we've had this issue of trying to get all this out to worldwide population. So it
Yeah.
sucks. It
I
sucks, but
remember
it's yeah.
I remember there was this one thing I saw, one of the doctors I follow, his mother got the COVID vaccine, and she still had her sticker, uh, the polio pioneer. She was involved in the initial trials of the successful polio vaccine.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very cool. And she was there showing her thumbs up that she's getting the vaccine, and I was like, that's really cool. I was just like, and
I
there's a
just got
couple.
chills.
I know. Very cool,
Oh,
right?
I haven't done that.
And but
That's
there,
awesome.
I'm telling you guys that and everyone here that I have faith, and
Hmm.
again, I'm not being paid to say any of this. This is I am taking time out of my day to come to Tony's stream. And anyone, by the way, if you're a streamer or anyone like that, I am here to talk to your community really and
Hmm.
comfort everyone to really know that there are very good scientists on board. There are really like amazing doctors who are working in the field that are really trying to make sure that people are getting better.
Yeah.
Um, and
Education is key. Education is
education
absolutely
is
key.
so key. Education is key, and that's what I'm here to do: is make sure that your community is educated. We know the limitations. We know what to say. We know
Yeah.
what not to say. And I know a lot of folks who come up to me. One of the biggest things is that they're trying to challenge uh, theories, and a lot of these folks who are misinformation, disinformation. And the best thing I could tell you right now is that the best thing to do for a lot of these misinformation, disinformation campaign is to disengage.
Yeah.
Especially with how social engineering works and things like that, is you disengage, don't give them a platform, they can't spread that
Right.
information further. And that I think a lot of people tend to forget that and want to correct it. If you are not in the position to correct it, or if you're going to get emotional about it, it's best to take a step back and realize that not engaging is one of the most effective ways to combat that, or even reporting it, or doing or talk or letting someone who is an official talk through them about it. If one of your loved ones or friends comes up and starts talking about it, and they truly do believe in anti-vax propaganda, don't dismiss them. That's one of the worst things you can do. Talk
Hmm.
to them and ask them, why do you believe in this?
Right.
And really understand what it is that they believe, and then ask them if they truly are open to other ideas. That's another thing. If they aren't open to other ideas for discussion, then disengage, because
It,
at that point it's not helpful for either of you two.
so it's along that lines, and that's something that my community and everyone knows me knows. I try to engage in a way to try to be helpful and try to spread as much education as possible. But there are times you absolutely just like, nope, not dealing with that. Sorry, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
But the child actually a few years ago watched a couple of documentations on flat earthers and other things, and the psychology behind a lot of people that believe in the misinformation campaigns or believe in propaganda is because they don't have people in their lives that believe them and believe in them, and that they find these people, and that now all of a sudden they have a family that believes them and in them. So sometimes I believe if we just reach out a hand and listen and try to not dismiss, not shut down, listen to people and try to get them to understand in a caring way,
Mm-hmm.
that we can change the world, but it's exhausting, and sometimes we don't have the mental energy for that sometimes. So
Yeah.
it's if you don't have the mental energy, I completely agree, it's better to disengage and just move on,
Right.
and don't put yourself through the mental trauma.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
yeah, I love you, Neuro. You're fantastic. All right, so it is at this point in time. Now, this is, of course, a in your opinion question.
Okay.
Um, do you think that the vaccine situation that we have right now will improve? Do you think we're going to get other companies coming out, or do you think that this is going to be the levels that we're vaccinated at right now? Like, are we ever going to be able to ramp up any?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When I have first worked with the Biden transition team, President Biden,
Mm-hmm.
one of the many things that, again, and I know a lot of people have opinions and stuff like that. This is not political in terms of anything, but we have scientists all over the spectrum to really address this problem from
Mm-hmm.
head on. And we have, and when we said that we were going to try to aim for 100 million doses in 100 days, we're not kidding. And we're going to continue finding new ways to bring in, companies like Amazon. We're going to talk to other pharmaceutical companies that are out there who aren't, doing anything, but they are, but who aren't
Right.
involved in the COVID. And we're going to try and find ways to expand production. We're going to find better ways to distribute the vaccines.
Okay.
This is a brand new world, and so every two steps we take, we'll probably have a step. We might take a step back. Don't be disheartened by that one test step back. This is just part of the learning process. And we are doing our darndest best to really expand out as much as we can into this. And in my professional opinion, in my personal opinion, I really do think we'll get there.
Awesome.
We need to have patience. We need to understand that there's so many things we can do to really help, which is masking and social distancing. Those have always worked and they will work till the end of time. And we need to have faith that the scientists and the people that we're bringing on are working in our best interests. And really just making sure that, once again, when we have the opportunity to educate ourselves, find it and really ask questions and really try to dig deep into it. This is such a cool time too, like for a lot of folks. Like, this is the time where so much information is coming out about diseases that most people never knew. Like, most people have never known that gosh darn, is that mRNA. It's like, okay, well, now we know, because we have these
I had
vaccines
no
that
clue about
utilize.
the mNRA. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's
Yeah.
so,
Sorry.
I mean, but that's the craziness of it. And I think that we have gotten to the point where, all this information is out there. We just need to look for it. And believe me when I tell you that there's a lot of people on Twitter and a lot of people out there who are willing to share this information. We get excited, like when someone says, "Hey, Neuro or whoever, can you come on board and talk about this?" We're like, "Yes, can I pencil you in? When do you want to talk about it?" And this is an exciting time for us to really have these discussions. And really, it's just, I think we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We will scale up. We will address some of the shortages, and we'll find some ways. And we'll stumble along the way. We're human. We're all humans. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to things will happen. And once we get there, you're gonna realize, oh my God, I went through all of this. Like, this is something where this is a huge point in humanity's history that we're experiencing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wait, there was something I was going to say and I completely. Oh yes, the so as you were going through and talking about that with ramping up and with you involving other companies that aren't currently working on the vaccine to, hey, let's work on this vaccine.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that as you know, I'm a huge proponent and supporter of St. Jude, and one of the reasons why I support them so much is because of their open knowledge. Anytime that they do research, anytime that they find something, they immediately, it's open for the world. Here you go. Here's our research. We're not going to be selfish about that. Are you finding with this, with creating the vaccine for COVID, are other companies doing that, or is it more of the it's our trade secrets, we're going to do this, but you can help us with that?
I would say so like with the original SARS-CoV-2 virus, it was originally sequenced in its entirety. It was shared with everyone.
Okay.
Everyone has their own technology. Everyone has their own, private methodology. But we have seen some collaborations that have happened and are starting to happen again. One of the big ones that I've been very happy about is a company called Sanofi. They decided to step up, and they normally produce like their own stuff, and they said, hey, Pfizer, let us help you create more of the vaccines. We have some factories ready to go here, and we can make some more vaccines. And I was so happy when that happened, because we need more of that collaboration, and a lot more companies are starting to come aware of it. And like companies like Merck, for example, that recently had a failed vaccine, they said, hey, we're still going to continue ramping up our stuff. We might talk to other companies to see where we can offer help as well. And then and they're also talking to different companies that don't do vaccines, such as Amazon, because Amazon has for better or worse, a very powerful logistic engine behind it.
Oh,
So they can
yes.
get things out fast, they can get
Mm-hmm.
places. And having that power is absolutely critical. And I think we need to think outside the medical pharmaceutical world and say, what
Okay.
can we do to talk to other people? And that's what this administration has been focusing on, is like, what can we think outside the box to really fix the problem of getting vaccines to the most vulnerable people
Mm-hmm.
faster and safely?
Right, because especially because with this vaccine, it has to be kept at a super, super cold, cold temperature, right?
The
And so
Pfizer one does, yeah.
the Pfizer one, okay, but the Moderna one doesn't?
It does. It's not as strict, and it
Okay.
has a little bit of a better shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
And the Johnson and Johnson and Novavax have a little bit better as well.
Okay.
So Pfizer is probably the strictest one, but it's still one of those things that, like, if you're in which we've seen where if the freezer breaks down, you don't have long to really administer that. So we've seen that situation happen where I think like a truck like careened and
Mm-hmm.
all these vaccines were sitting in. So they basically went down to the traffic and said, "Hey, do you want this vaccine?"
Right.
And
Okay.
same thing to some local hospitals where their freezer broke down. So they said, "Hey, anyone who's here, I don't care if you're a patient, janitor, nurse, administrator, do you
Mm-hmm.
want the vaccine or not?" And that's kind of where we're going.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. All right. Couple. I'm going back to the question list again for the Q and A's. We do have someone that popped in late that missed our
Sure.
discussion about the if they have a autoimmune disease,
Mhm.
should they get the vaccine? We did talk about it for a while. It's about 30 minutes into the broadcast. We talked about for a good 15 20 minutes. But the bottom
Sure.
line was talk to your doctor. Have
Absolutely.
a conversation with your doctor, and then of course if you want to watch the whole conversation, you can rewind it, or eventually we're both going to put these onto YouTube. So then you can go back and we'll have timestamps. So you can see the questions and you can see the answers with the timestamps.
Hmm.
So now, this is an interesting question that someone had.
Sure.
How, and this goes back to the spread of misinformation and spread of people that okay, how do we slow the spread when it seems that there are people that just don't care?
Um,
And see, it's such a hard question too. And I almost didn't ask it, but I'm like, no, we do. That's something we have to address because I know there's people like myself that get frustrated because
yeah.
there's a certain population that it's like it's back in high school where you're in. I say this quite a few times when you're in the group experiments and the group projects and you do all the work but everyone gets all the credit for things that you did. It's so is there anything, is that's probably the better way to word it, is there anything that we can do to try to help in order to get people to care or to possibly slow this more other than taking care of ourselves and our family?
Um, so several things. One of the best things you can do when you come across misinformation or really aggressive disinformation campaign is to not engage with it. They benefit off of clicks, retweets, likes, all this other stuff, and that's how social engineering really works, right? It's that
Mm-hmm.
they know that the more interaction it gets, the more visible people see it. So, and that applies to Facebook as well, right? You see your Aunt Vivian giving you this. It says that this is, oh, I
Yeah.
heard from this, and really not vetting your sources and stuff like that. So, really not engaging with those posts. And the second being the fact that, and if you are comfortable being much more, and so I've just skipped a step. The
Sorry.
second being the fact that when, oh, no, not my fault, is when you can report misinformation or
Mm-hmm.
disinformation, like not really engaging with it, but report it. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff that's out there that you can do right now. Is rolling out a what they call bird watch, which I'm going to be taking part of, and a couple of other scientists, where if we see disinformation, we basically put in this like hidden thread to say like this is a reason why this is not right, and we provide studies and we provide comments and things like that. It's still in the works, so we're still figuring that out. But for the average person, if you see bad information being spread, like anti-vaxxer propaganda and things like that, don't engage with it. Don't click. Don't retweet. Don't quote tweet it.
Mm-hmm.
just report it and leave it as is and don't share, because gain momentum. And the third, finally, is just really like being, if you're comfortable with it, like sharing good information that's out there and talking about why it's good information. And that's essentially only if you're comfortable with it, right? And I tell people, like, if you're not comfortable with it, if you're not well versed in it, don't try to engage in it too much, because that's how disinformation gets there. Is that they'll say you don't really understand this, and you shouldn't be sharing this information, and that's how they'll try to get you. And so, but also, like, sometimes referencing to people who do know what they're talking about, right? Like, there's a lot of folks out there who do know exactly what they're talking about, have been posting rigorously on all the developments and all the different things going on, and really, like, kind of pointing them in this direction and saying, hey, like, this person is out there trying to talk about, why this is a misinformation, and this is the valid reason why. And I think there's ways around it, but I think one of the more, very much like, and the point being at the end is that the best way you can do is just not engage, especially with strangers, right, on the internet. Don't engage with their misinformation and disinformation. That's how they get you, is that they go for outrage, they go for emotional attacks, and that's when you will want to be like, you'll want to requote them, or you want to take a snapshot and then say, like, how dare this person do this and this and this, and that's how they get people clicking. And
it's the whole adage of any shares are good shares, and it's don't give them any attention. Now, could they if they find this stuff, are you saying that, and they do want to engage, should they instead tag you?
I wouldn't even say tag me, because I won't be able to engage in all of that if that's the case.
Because it's actually better to just try to ignore it and not give them the attention.
Be cognizant of it. Know that it's out there, but don't really. But I wouldn't say ignore it, because you want to make sure you know what's bad information, what's good information. But and if it's something where it's like you want to have a discussion, and it's the reason beauty about these forums right here that we're talking through. Bring it to these types of forums. There's a lot of Q&As and a lot of open sessions with scientists and everything. You'd be surprised that's out there, where you can bring these questions. You're like, hey, I heard that X, Y, and Z is causing, this issue. What is your opinion of it? And we will be able to break it down for you and tell you, well, this is the reason why it's not exactly correct. Here are the resources, and here are things here's kind of the science behind it. And that's the best way to kind of approach it. And especially if you are that interested and you want to get more engaged. And I constantly say, like, if you want to get engaged, because it's not everyone's cup of tea, I understand. And it's also takes a lot of time and energy, because I can tell you right now, for me, I get like 17 to 20 something scientific papers a day to read through, review, and Quiltoni has seen me do it like at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, well, we'll be sitting in a group chat and socializing, and there's Neuro going. and we're like, are you? Yes, I'm still working. and reading all the papers. And
I love this. Oh, by the way, I love that this for mouse. I love that you gave positive reinforcement. That's another great thing too, right? Like, really, and it's, again, like, there's so many little things that we can do from a positive perspective to help positively reinforce people who are doing good behavior. And also, just like I said, if there is a lot of bad information, there is a lot of situation where it's not safe, then really kind of avoiding that.
Right. Fantastic. You know what? We have gone through all of our questions, and I think that's everything that I know. I think that's everything that we've got. So we'll leave it open for a few more minutes in case anyone that is watching live has any last minute questions of maybe things we haven't touched on or things that have just popped up.
Sure.
In the meantime, is there anything else that we didn't hit that you wanted to bring up or talk about?
No, I think surprisingly we hit all the hot topic buttons, really.
Wait, you're saying that I did my research and I prepared? That's not me.
You did.
I don't prepare. What are you talking about? I don't do
Clap
that.
for Tony, everyone.
No,
Clap for
I fly
applaud
off
for
at the
Tony.
hip. I don't. So, yeah, no. So it's and overall, it is continuing on. I really feel as long as we are uh, doing what we can, um, try not getting overly stressed out. Don't try
Mhm.
not to. And the biggest thing. I found something. We can something else. The one of the biggest things here in Canada. And I again, this is where I've been for the past year, so I only catch some news from the states. Um, is the people that are against shutdowns? Like we're in a huge shutdown right now.
Mhm.
Nothing is open unless it's a grocery store or a fast food place. Um,
Mhm.
so the biggest things is that people are saying that, well, this is damaging our mental health, and that's worse than everyone catching COVID and filling the hospitals. It's a very catch 22 because we do need to think about our mental health, but we also need to think about our physical health and the health of our entire community.
Yeah.
So for those people that, and which is why I joked about, don't let this stress you out too much because you do have to think about your mental health.
Yeah.
What are ways, or do you know any resources, or what are ways that we can stay sane while staying home? Have you thought about that?
That is a very loaded question. It's a good
Right?
question. I think really finding ways to stay in communication with people is critical. We are social creatures, and this is applies for our introverts, extroverts, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't like applying those like labels because I think all of us are a bit of both in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And making sure we're maintaining schedules, like that's actually one of the biggest things I tell people, like even if you're not commuting or doing schedules, wake up at the scope, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time,
Right.
have a schedule throughout your day. It's actually amazing as to how much things you realize how important your body functions in terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that you're eating well, really like making sure that like you're having, and obviously for people who don't normally eat well or anything like that, having vitamins if you need to, but eating well, making
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're eating square meals throughout the day, but not too much.
It's
I don't
funny.
want to get
I've actually been eating better in quarantine, better here in the house for the past year than I normally do on the road.
wonderful. No, that's good though. That's
Yeah.
good, right? So this
Yeah.
is a good opportunity for a lot of folks to really now
Right.
that you have time at home to do that. And like I think I talked about the social aspect. So like,
Right.
scheduling time with family to go on FaceTime, Zoom. I know it's
Right.
not the same thing, but I know a lot of people are saying like, well, it's not like me talking to people and stuff. I'm like, but you'd be
Mm-hmm.
surprised as to making scheduling a time every week does help. I
Right.
will tell you right now that Wookie Cookies, we get together in the evenings, I think like 4 or 5 days out of the week, and
Probably.
we just sit there and
Yeah.
surprisingly we just chat about nothing, and
Yep.
that is very therapeutic for us because we have human contact and we're just chatting and stuff. So it's very
Yep.
good about that.
Yeah, and
Um,
I've said numerous times that the stream team has kept me sane this past year
mhm.
because it is people that are my same, that like the same things I do, that we can just sit and talk about nothing. And
Right.
sometimes you need that. And so I want to make sure that everyone in my community, both on YouTube and on Twitch and everywhere else, knows in my Discord. You just go to my Twitch channel, !Discord, and you can join in. I have an open voice video channel. So at any time, if anyone wants to pop in and hang out with each other, there's a space that I've already created for that. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that there is a space during my streams. Feel free to pop into there. You can chat with each other. You can talk to each other. It's a way that you can have that social without
Mhm.
leaving and being in front of people. So,
Mhm. Yeah. And I guess like also just making sure you get some exercise, right? Like taking a few minutes walk. It's actually good for you, by the way, to everyone to take a 15 to 20-minute walk, maybe 30 if you could, outside in
Exercise?
this and in this, or even
No.
not even exercise, just a little bit of
I'm kidding.
activity, right? Get
I
up
walk the
and
dogs. I know. I'm joking.
get
Yes.
some sunlight. It's actually
Right.
good for you. Like sunlight,
Hmm.
vitamin D from sunlight is actually good, which I guess we could talk about too about the vitamin D situation.
Right.
But it's good for you to get that sunlight, sun during the day and all sort of stuff. So
I actually have, and this is something I talk about all the time, which I've always had this issue of not enough vitamin D because my studio here is in the basement. There's no windows.
mhm,
And so I'm down here probably at least 10 hours out of the day because this is where my studio is. This is where I work. I have daylight lamps that I have, and that's what that is up there. That's what they're
mhm,
around here, that they simulate the sun and you actually get vitamin D out of them, and they're great. They're fantastic. I love them.
mhm.
So yeah,
You should probably still take vitamin D supplements though.
I do. I take all the vitamins. I'm healthy. No, I do. I take vitamin D supplements. I take regular multivitamin, and then of course I'm a woman, so I take calcium and the B sub.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. There
yeah,
you go.
yeah.
So, but yeah, if you guys have any other questions, I mean, like this is your
Yeah.
time. If you've been having that burning question, that's been sitting in your gut for a while, let me know. Like I am available to answer. This is like the forum to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you asked that question about the whole like how to keep sane during this quarantine time. Um, I will
It's
admit that
hard sometimes.
sometimes
Yeah. Yeah.
I, like I love my husband to death. I love him. But there are some times where I'm just like, I need you to stand there and I'm going to be here.
Oh, what's really funny, so a lot of my community knows this already. What's really, really funny is that my husband had worked for the employer that he had
Uh-huh.
for over 20 years and had been approached by a different company over the course of a 5-year period. In
Uh-huh.
December of last year, we had a long conversation. They were trying to recruit him hard. We had a
Hmm.
long conversation, and we decided that, you know what, it's time. It's time to move on. I know you've been here for 20 years, but you need to move to this new company. And the biggest struggle was this new company, he'd be working from home, and which he wasn't doing before. And so
Yeah.
we had already started that. Now, of course, we had put this into place thinking I wasn't going to be here 50% of the time, but we had already started to have these things in place, and we had already figured out, look, when I'm home and he's home during this period of time, don't talk to each other. This is my space, that is your space, and that's it. If you need something, you go up to the person and you look at them. Like, he's already come down in the middle of all this and looked at me, and I ignored him, so he knows that, nope, okay, can't talk, and he goes back upstairs. you
Hmm.
you you gotta think of these things. You gotta put these things in place, or else you're like, they're gonna drive you crazy, absolutely crazy. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that like again, just making sure you and your loved ones are maintaining schedules.
yep.
You're maintaining like even if it has to be, sometimes I tell people it's actually healthy to have scheduled like time together, so that way you create that bit of sense of
Yes.
barrier and to
Mm-hmm.
understand that okay, this is the time that's me by myself, I'm going to do my thing, and establishing ground rules, and then having saying like after 6 p.m. we can go cuddle on the couch and watch TV, but
Right.
until then I'm going to be working or I'm going to be doing my own thing. And I think that that's really helpful because I think a lot of people aren't used to that, right? Like
Right.
I'm certainly getting used to the whole factor that I'm being home a lot more often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
That's the keeping ourselves sane. Now, of course, for then the person that lives by themselves, it's even worse because they're
yeah.
not seeing people. So it's extremely important then to get on those calls, to talk to people, to have that connection. It
Mhm.
is, and it's interesting that places like Zoom, oh, hi, Zoom has exploded, but then it's also the online platforms, Twitch and YouTube and all these other places where you have the ability. So like I stream on Twitch on a regular basis and now YouTube on a regular basis, and there's interaction. I'm talking with
Yeah.
people and it's great, and it keeps me sane. So
Yeah, and that's
yeah,
wonderful. Like I said, it's just make sure you keep that interaction going is going to be good for your mental health.
yeah. And
whatever
this is what's
doses you can.
keeping me sane as well, right, baby? It's fostering all the babies. I know. I know. That's project. Give yourself a project. That's, I think that keeps you sane as well, right?
Yes,
Having
my fur
something
babies.
else. Yes.
Yeah,
I
I
know.
love
Well, not just fur
what.
babies, but keeping something else that you can focus on that's not the world.
Yes.
So, yeah. And of course, for me, it's the fosters and doing all that. And yeah. All right. See, I guess we've done just like an excellent job of answering everything, apparently. We
I think
answered all the
so.
things because there's no other questions that have been popping up.
Yeah, it looks like most of chat's pretty content with the, Q&A portion. So I'm
Yeah,
happy that I was able to answer all of your questions.
this is
Um,
fantastic. Now, in the future, because more things are going to happen. This is not over. We're in the middle of this right now. More stuff's going to happen. Don't forget that Neuro does stream on Twitch. He right now you're trying to do at least once a month, right?
mhm. Try to.
Obviously, he's a doctor. He works for this. He's a consultant for the State Department on COVID. He's a busy person. So he gets the streams in when he can. So at least once a month is what he tries.
I try.
Yeah. So, but follow his Twitch, turn on notifications, and then you can be notified of it. We were talking in these past few days. He's going to try to do more on YouTube as well. So follow that YouTube channel to answer questions, and of course he has Twitter.
I am the most active on Twitter. Like I post
All
at
the time.
least all the time. All the time. I do it when I'm talking to people. I'm like,
Yes.
uh-huh.
I'm
And
updating things now. Yes. Hi. I swear every time I refresh my Twitter, there's a new post from Neuro on there. It's always. And yeah, it's good. It's because it's good information. So he shares other people. He talks about theories. He talks about science. He talks about, he does all sorts of things on there. So it's a good Twitter. So
Oh, I did see
yes.
one question comment. Sorry. How many
Oh,
mutations do you think we will see before we have a sense of being normal? Oh, that's a very hard question to answer. I don't know.
yeah.
I it depends on how quickly we react to it. If let's say if we don't act on it and we just open everything up, and go bonkers a little bit, we might see a good, 4 or 5 more. I mean, that's a very rough, like grab the number out of the air.
Right.
I know my colleagues will probably yell at me. But I mean, we'll see a lot more.
Well, it all depends upon how many people get infected to how many mutations there are, right? Because the more
Mhm.
infections there are, the more chances there are for it to mutate.
Yeah, look at you. Look at you.
Ah, look at me learning.
You're a gosh darn science communicator right now.
Oh, look at me all. See? That's how good you are with your education that you taught me these things.
And that is my husband, by the way, who walked past
Yes,
it.
yes.
He is a toxicologist at the New York hospital,
He's also a
and
doctor. Yep.
mhm.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we are working.
Yes, and I know everyone in chat's been commenting about the cats that keep coming by and going around. I know I keep spotting them, and yeah, you've got
Yeah,
one
they're
back right now.
around.
Yeah.
He's just munching on his leftover dinner because he was just like, I'm gonna eat it and I'm gonna leave it alone, and
Yeah.
I come back 30 minutes later and I'm gonna eat it again.
Yeah. And yes, that's true. If you can teach me, you can teach anyone. If I can understand it, then anyone can understand it.
I'm
So,
glad.
so follow his Twitter, follow his YouTube, follow his Twitch to get more information, to ask questions in the future. But also look at the website. So how often do you guys update the COVID Act Now website?
Daily.
Okay.
We daily. So that COVID Act Now you can do right now is that you can actually, for the United States citizens, so apologies for anyone who's not, if you're a United States citizen and you want to know what the status is of how infections are progressing, how much you're doing with vaccinations and all these different things, you can subscribe to it by your county and your state. So you can get much more relevant information on a daily basis. And then also what's cool about it as well is that if you were also inclined, what we do, like I think every other day, is that we send a kind of a newsletter of here are some of the cool scientific papers out there, and we're going to translate it into English. Like we're going to basically tell you.
It.
So for the average person to understand what's so cool about this paper, so it's kind of a cool little initiative for us to kind of educate people on. And you can also see all the data for people who are a little bit more data analytics focused. All of our tools and all of our data is available in there. You can access the API. You can access the actual Excel workbook that mimics the tool itself, so you can play around with the figures. Any future epidemiologists. But yeah, you can do a lot of cool stuff on that website. There's a lot of other websites too that are really cool
That's
that are
really
out
cool.
there. And
So I can sign up for my parents and I can get information on their area, is what you're saying?
absolutely,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's
Um,
fantastic. I love that. Yeah, so go to the covidactnow.org and check it out. That sounds really
absolutely.
cool. All right, anything else that you want to add before we wrap it up?
Um, Honestly, once again, like my Twitter is the biggest hub of
Yeah.
information. Support on there, likes and retweets on there really help me like get my message out. So if you do see something that you're like, this is something that everyone needs to hear, or this is important information, and like feel free to do that. I am reachable also on Twitter and Discord as well. I'm very accessible, guys. I try to do my best to answer as many questions as possible from my community and to
Mm-hmm.
others as well. I've opened it up to everyone. That helps me a lot in terms of getting, my platform up and going. And yeah, thank you again. And if you
Fantastic.
have Twitch friends, or if you're a Twitch streamer yourself and
Yep.
you are interested in bringing me on board to talk with your community, answer questions, and
Mm-hmm.
come and bring kind of a real picture about this, I am available as well.
Now, would you also consider doing YouTube Live for those people on YouTube?
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, so basically, if anyone wants to bring you on as a guest, you're open for it, is what you're saying.
Yes, I'm
Okay,
opening myself up. Spots are
fantastic.
limited.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today,
Thank
Neuro.
you.
I super, super
Thank you.
appreciate that.
I
So, thank
appreciate
you
this.
guys very, very much for joining us as well. And you've got all of his contact info. It's all down right there. So, you can follow and get a hold of him if you need him. So,
Yes,
thanks,
thank you.
guys.